The raging tyrant, the bender of minds, the one-man scourge, Tomar Graspin. He is known by many names, most of which were earned in his greedy campaign to conquer all the lands of Tanzel. These stories sounded like fairy tales when you first heard them. One man turning an entire opposing army to his side, those same soldiers marching and fighting tirelessly in his name, without stopping to eat or rest. Then one day it came to your door, as it did for all the people of Tanzel. The raging tyrant's armies, like a tide that never stops rising. The eyes of his men glowing red with his influence, their minds locked away and their bodies his to command. You've seen great horrors in these times, people burned alive, children slain without mercy, and now you find yourself with a small group of able-bodied dissenters and a foolish plan to put an end to Tomer Graspin once and for all.
Krog lived in the high mountains. Krog's wife, very sick. The plants he finds are not strong enough. He takes her to the little man down the valley. Little man says, fetch yellow flowers from the far river. Krog run very far, very fast, but too late. Village is on fire. Wife gone. I will not rest until the warlord's head is mine.
Vela Kest and her brother Victrin were raised in the orphanage, but the orphanage wasn't built for defense. Vela used to be a healer, but dark times call for dark measures. When the tyrant came, her twin brother tried to defend the other children, but turned like all the rest. Vela knows the only way to save him. Exsanguiate Tamar Graspin.
James Robert Whiteman, aka Jim Bob. He is from the border area of Louisiana/Texas, and he was on a hunting trip, which he's an avid hunter, and he came across a mysterious doorway in the middle of the forest and finds himself in an unknown land with strange things going on. We'll see how that works out for him. But he has a crossbow, and he's pretty dangerous with it.
This scourge, this man's army, it is taken over the entire realm of Tanzel. And the people you're with is like a ragtag group of survivors. Old people, young people, most of like the fit warrior types, they've already been killed or turned. And your group is comprised of unlikely allies who've put aside their differences, all the races who've put aside their turf wars and xenophobia, because this is bigger than anybody. You sit around your campfire out in the Badlands, far away from any of the civilizations that have been turned. You sit there with Tartwell, a spry old half-elven man, formerly the constable of a town named Edat in eastern Tanzel, not far from where the scourge began. He watched the first armies march off to battle, only to come back with their minds twisted. And also sitting around your fire is Risa, a 14-year-old human girl, the eldest daughter of a woodsman and a baker in the Skirtwood. The Skirtwood is a deciduous forest in Tanzel, in the midwestern part of Tanzel, that runs into the Great Forest, which is home to most of the elves. Tomer knew he could not simply walk into the land of elves and come out victorious. So his armies marched on Skirtwood in late fall, where they set a great fire that burned the elven forest for months. But Skirtwood was gone in a matter of hours. Nothing but ash. And she has the face of someone who is aged 20 years in the last few weeks or months, probably. She clutches a spear. She has ill-fitting leathers and helm that she's scraped off dead allies and enemies alike. And the old man sits there in outdated combat gear that he had long before any of you were born, that he used on his job defending his small town. Tartwell says, well, it's a crazy plan. We have a puncher's chance, at least. If we can stop him, if we can kill him, we might have a chance to save the land.
I don't care about the land. I will have his head. As I slam the butt of my axe on the ground, because there's no table to hit.
As you say that, Risa, the 14-year-old girl, she like tightens her grip on her spear, looks into the fire with a 1,000-yard stare, and like nods along with you. His death will come by our hand. She seems on the verge of raging.
We all agree the only way to kill a snake to cut off its head.
So we should probably go over the plan in greater detail. Obviously, from here in the Badlands, we will have a few days' travel, and as we get closer to what was once civilization, we will need to keep our heads low, stay out of the view of his men. Our only chance is surprise. If we can sneak up to Tomer's camp undetected, myself and Risa can run our small group of forces in a pincer attack to draw out his men. And then you, the strike force, as he gestures to the three of you, can make the move to kill him. Catching him alone will be your only chance.
I demand the glory of his death.
I'm sure you'll get the opportunity, and I will gladly cede it to you, but success is paramount. We all need to be willing to give the ultimate sacrifice, or there'll be no Tanzel left to sacrifice.
Ultimate sacrifice, Tartwell.
I'm willing to give my life to protect this place of that tyrant. I won't hesitate. Everything else has been taken from us. Tartwell looks over at you, Jim Bob, and says, "You're not from these lands. You've been pulled into a stranger's war."
You smell weird.
Why? I'm gonna tell you something, guys. Where I come from, we don't like bullies. So I heard about this Tyrell guy, fella, and I don't like him. So I'm gonna help you guys get rid of him. Bring freedom here, just like back home in America.
This land of great freedom you speak of, it inspires me. Hopefully its glory will be seen here as well. Thank you. So with that, you guys travel closer to the heart of Tanzel toward the Raging Tyrant's war camp. And as you are traveling towards the center of Tanzel, and you're traveling through these once beautiful forests that are now scorched ash, it's hard to breathe here because every step kicks up more ash and it's hard to see. And as your party of adventurers chokes through the land, you are suddenly attacked by a scouting party of Tomer's army. You know that being seen by them is very dangerous, that he has extra sensory powers of certain types. You don't quite have the details, but you know that the longer those people are alive, having seen you, the more likely it is that Tomer will know you are coming. So everyone's going to make a defy danger as some bolts and arrows come flying at the party.
I am going to just start heedlessly charging at full sprint running towards the guy shooting at us, the archers.
At the first sight of the enemy, your barbarian friend charges towards them and gets struck by crossbow bolt for 8 damage, pierce 1 armor.
So my character, I haven't described her yet. She's got auburn hair that's put up in a tight bun and like Victorian black cotton dress, which clearly has a thick, looks rather impenetrable.
Okay.
Imagine scary Victorian lady of a haunted house.
She's like the tall lady from the newer Resident Evil. You stand there in defiance as arrows and crossbow bolts land around you. What about Jim Bob?
Yeah, Jim Bob got hit. He tried to dive out of the way, but
All right, Jim Bob.
new world.
You dodge to the side of one cluster of fire and are immediately struck by another in the shoulder. You see Hartwell calls out to the three of you, "I'll send Risa ahead to keep the group moving. We need to make sure these guys don't make it back, or the Titan will know we are coming to kill him."
So as the crossbow hits me, I look at the guy who fired the bolt and I just snap it. It's still in my shoulder, but I just snap it right off and draw out my axe to just try to cleave him.
Cool. So you come in with your axe and you slam it into this man's face and it sinks into his face and you hear the bones break and you pull back your axe and his face folds open with gore as it pours on the floor and he falls to the ground.
I'm just gonna shoot an arrow. You goddamn
unless you
son
have
of a bitch, you hit me.
Rapid fire your crossbow and just wing some of them as they're dodging between ashy stumps of what was once great trees.
Who are these people? They're humans.
If you look at them, they are covered in dirt and ash and mud, and they are wearing ragtag armors from different militaries across the lands, and their faces are gaunt, but their eyes are a fiery red, and their expressions are animalistic. You're looking at a scouting party of 5 or 6 guys.
Vela's going to take her tiger claws. Her weapon is like fanged knuckles. In Indian, you would call it bagnaka. And she's going to slit her own wrists and take 2 damage. And then she like gestures with her hands, and magically the blood forms a mantle around her to create this blood armor sheath and sprint into battle.
You're moving up, so they're still firing at some of the range warriors are still firing at you. You take 7 pierce 1, and then our barbarian friend, the guys around you have pulled their swords and axes and are trying to engage you in melee combat.
I have an ability called the One Who Knocks. When you defy danger on a 12 plus, you turn the danger back on itself.
So a guy thrusts at you with his sword, and you slide a lot faster than he thinks a big man like you can. And you take your hand and just keep pushing him forward, and he skewers into the warrior next to him, and he kills his friend.
And then I go to cleave him.
You go to cleave him, but the guy next to him is ready, the third man that you haven't addressed, and he brings his short sword under your armpit and stabs you and sends you off course. 2 of the 6 guys are dead, so we have 4 guys left.
I cast Blood Bolt, striking from my fingertips as blood leaves my area, and the blood that's being generated from Krog is coming into the mix as well.
So your bolts of blood slip under their armor and stab into their bodies, and they convulse and both fall to the floor dead. They're in melee combat with Krog as the last 2 archers are cut down, and Vela conjures back the blood to her. What is Jim Bob doing? Fire an arrow out, and it catches the guy who just stabbed Krog. Your bolt catches the man who just stabbed Krog in the armpit, right in the throat. And you hear a gurgling sound as more blood pours onto the battlefield, and he falls to his knees and then slumps over. There is 1 man left. This guy is smaller than you. You come by, you just use your weapon to parry his attack, and then you twist his wrist. You hear it crack as his sword falls from his hands, and you place your hands on him, and he struggles against your strength to no avail.
So now we've got this guy. We're gonna bind him with my adventure gear. I'm basically just gonna look him right in the eyes. Where is he?
You stare into his eyes, and he stares back at you without an intelligence. You scream at him at the top of your lungs, and there is no recognition that 2 people are communicating. You see the red pulsing, and you almost feel like it's staring back into you.
I'm going to push Krog aside. I'm going to say, this is how we do it in America. And then I'm going to start waterboarding the person with a rag and some water, my canteen.
So you do this, and he's like struggles as you do it. But when you pull him back up, it's not like he's been tortured. He looks at you with that same 1,000-yard stare.
This is magic. He's under some sort of magic.
Vela is going to come up to the other 2 and say, my friends, so cruel. And she's going to kneel down next to him and sink her tiger claw into his throat and gently rotate it around so that cut his throat and drain all the life force out of him and magically attain his soul.
Okay. And eventually the light fades from his eyes.
There's no need for cruelty, I'll remind you.
I need a minute. And I'm going to cut off the guy's head. I'm going to initiate for the blood god. You're initiated in the old ways of sacrifice. Choose something your gods or ancestors' totems value: gold, blood, bones. My people value the heads of their enemies. So I'm going to burn this in a fire, not collect it for myself. So I'm sacrificing it. I need some direction. Where are we going? I burn the skull.
Place it on burnt stump of an old tree.
I draw blood.
Build a fire.
Using the blood from the skull, I draw symbols on my face and stuff.
And you light it ablaze. And as it burns, the light flickers and you stare into it and you are transfixed. And you have a vision of you traveling towards the main camp, following the trail. And upon that trail, you stop and dig in the ash for a moment to pull out a charred remains of an elk. And you use that to eat the rest of the rations you need to survive the rest of this trip.
Okay.
And then you flash back where you are standing as the flame burns out.
I come back to you guys. I've got a vibe about me. And there's still blood, dried blood symbols all over my face.
This is a good look for you, Krog.
The blood god was appeased. I don't even look at you. I'm just like looking off to the distance. We go this way. And I point to the direction of my vision.
You guys wander through the forest following Krog and his vision. And at some point he stops, realizing he knows where he is, and turns and reaches into a pile of ash and pulls out an elk that had died in the fire that is mostly cooked, that you guys are able to eat off and feed the rest of your group, and you catch back up with the party and feed the rest of your troops there. And there's much relief when you show up with an out. People are not happy, but this is the closest you've seen people to like happy, relieved, let's say, that one of the more immediate threats, starvation, is no longer one, that they won't have to fight on an empty stomach.
The blood god provides.
She doesn't respond. Usually she always has a response to something. You see her smirk and her golden eyes kind of shift downward. I think we worship the same god.
Carl, can you tell me more about this blood god? I grew up with a god. Now I'm in this world and I'm questioning everything. Maybe the blood god is the answer.
All the blood that flows through you and flows through every living creature once flowed through him. He demands his back, and I shall give it to him with blood of my enemies.
This may be the PTSD talking, but that makes sense.
Where I come from, only the biggest survive.
Because you got the most blood. That makes sense. See, I get it. Blood god, number one.
I like to think that Jim Bob somewhere out of his pack just pulls out a can of beer, and you guys look at it, he just
Yeah, I imagine there's like that green military bag that just happens to have what he needs in it, right?
He definitely didn't go hunting without beer.
You know you're going into the final battle and you've been saving it. You had one more tall can of Bud Light and you are savoring it as we approach the eve of battle. So you guys had a rough trip. So you sit in the camp this night. No fire because it is A, a scarce resource, and B, too much of a signal to your enemy. As you lay on the burnt, scorched earth with your allies around, Tartwell says, Tomorrow we will be able to reach his camp. We must decide when the most opportune time to his attack is, which I will leave you to choose since you are the ones that must face him. But bear in mind, the longer we wait, the more chance he will discover us.
I say we go now. What are we waiting for? How about we attack at night?
What if we attack just before dawn in the faintest light of daybreak?
That works for me. The sooner we crush him, the better.
I have a plan that may prove advantageous. As everyone goes to bed, Vela goes off from the group and starts to cast a ritual where she attempts to control the weather using some of her own life force. I'm going to cast a spell. So I control the weather, and I am going to wish for heavy fog and mist to conceal the movement of our party.
You sit out in the forest and call on the power of the blood. And slowly but surely, as an hour rolls on, fog in this forest gets denser and denser and is slowly pushing as it moves through the forest in the direction you will be traveling. You were awoken in the pre-dawn, and the party, the small troop of warriors, mismatched folk that have banded together, march through the fog onto the camp. As you get closer to the camp, the party splits into three groups. Risa takes the youngest, the fastest warriors and starts skirting around the camp towards the far side. Tartwell takes the more stout and slow-footed and marches slightly eastward to get an opposite angle. And the three of you are left to scout the perimeter and determine where your best place of entry into the camp. You can't see shit from here, though, because the fog is so thick and there are still half-burnt trees between you and the camp. What do you do? As Reza nods and leaves, and Tartwell looks at the three of you and says, Godspeed, may you fell this evil tyrant. And he walks off with his men.
Well, I just look at him. Did anybody see which way to go before the fog came in?
You know which way. You know which way to go.
Oh.
You know you can. You know the camp is over there.
I'm gonna look at Jim.
I think you should go first.
Me?
My hastiness might lead us astray here. I will follow you.
You can see the marching of the parties. It looks like the trail is maybe a day old. The scouting parties, they haven't sent any out yet this morning. So either they're not sending them out or they'll be sending them out soon, and you can figure out where they're traveling and avoid that particular path. But it seems a little odd. It seems like these paths are well traveled. Like somebody comes down these every few hours. It's weird that these tracks like haven't been tread this morning. Through the night, there should have been somebody doing a patrol, but at some point that stopped. And that seems odd.
So I relay this to the party.
Do you think we should draw them out here, or do you think we should run in there?
I'm pretty good at setting traps. I think if we brought him out here, I could
Set some traps, and I throw up my horn. Think I can get them out here? Can we create some sort of like kill box area that we think might be like beginning of the camp, like right when they go to run out of the camp? So why don't you sneak as close to the beginning of the camp as you can get, like at the entrance, and get your traps there, Jim? Then bring the animals to me.
So the first trap I'm going to make, I'm going to grab a couple of my arrows, put them up in the ground, cover them, and then I'll set like a line so that some people like they just fall over them, trip onto the spikes.
You're very quiet, and you set it up, and then you slink back to the group with your traps set.
I look at Vela. Are we ready? Do you need any preparations?
Preparations. Another idea comes to mind, and she starts to wave her hands, and the fog in the circle of the traps, that fog, you can see it glimmers and turns to a blood mist, but then illusory looks like fog again, and all creatures within that space take an extra 1d6 damage from all damage they take.
And I blow my mighty horn loud.
You hear that echo out, and you guys wait, and you're staring out in the fog. Your brain is playing tricks on you, trying to make images out of the gray mist. In the just breaking light of the day, everything is still pretty dark, and you can see points of light are starting to come forward in the fog, a reddish orange glow. Multiple points moving slowly in a wide group towards the edge of the once living forest. They stop at the edge of the forest, and you hear several voices speaking the same words, different voices, but in unison speak. I know you have come for me. Did you think I did not see you? You will fail like everyone else had. Turn yourselves over now, and you will receive a swift, merciless death. Everyone in the camp is speaking this in unison.
Where's my wife?
They all laugh in unison. It is terrifying. I could know one from another now. I am all that is left. I am inevitable. If you wish to prolong this, fine. You'll end up dead. The light start to shift a little bit, and then bolts of crossbows and arrows lit with flaming tips are fired into the burnt forest from all sorts of directions. Like, it's clear they don't know exactly where anybody is, but you see it happening in the forest around you. Archers lighting arrows, firing, picking a different direction, lighting an arrow, firing. You hear some screaming from further around the other side of the camp as your allies are getting ambushed by arrow fire, and you get the feeling that the surprise element of your operation has been lost, and that the distraction is going to be a lot less effective than it was supposed to. What do you guys want to do?
I'm gonna have to just start headed towards the arrow fire.
Okay.
Careful not to go where I know the traps and blood mist are. And I'm looking for a target to hack and slash.
Okay, you come charging out of the misty burnt forest and into the camp. As you get closer, the mist is thinning because there are several large fires now lit in the middle of the camp. And every person who is standing around in the camp that is not holding a ranged weapon is holding a torch. And they are waving their fire and lighting others' arrows and waving their fire to move back the mist. And you come flying out in front of an archer who is pulling up a bow with a lit arrow.
I'm going to smash.
You come down, and this guy's like at a slight angle. He's like lighting off somebody's torch, and he's coming back this way. And you bring the axe down across his neck and remove his head from his body. And blood sprays up from the corpse as it falls down. This does cause a little bit of a scene. And men around you start changing tactics, start pulling swords and charging towards the part of the forest you came out of, hoping to find more of your allies, as some of them also come towards you. Some of them are going to hit these traps, though. You get bonus damage from the sanguine mist from Vela. You see several people come back into the mist from where the barbarian left it, and they're swinging their torches to try to clear the mist, and they're kind of charging into the wood. And several men hit the tripwire and fall onto the spikes, like 3 guys. So these guys die. They come charging, they hit the tripwire, they fall hard, and are all skewered through. And wriggle for a moment and then stop.
I got them real good.
Vela is just confidently, creepily striding forward out of the woods through the remainder of the mist. And she's going to shape some of the fog around her and the newly spilled blood from her friends into, I can only describe them as blood mist ghouls. And I cast the spell Wild Hunt. Name a person or creature I wish to hunt. I am hunting Tomer Graspin. My spiritual creatures will seek them out no matter where they hide. While this spell is ongoing, when I lift my head and howl to the sky, my creatures will howl back, telling me which direction my target lies. Additionally, when I deal damage to the target, I deal an additional 1d6 damage as they join me in my attack, and it lasts until I dismiss it, my target is killed, or until I cast this spell again.
You gather the mist and the blood. What do these creatures look like?
Almost like a cross between a wolf and a frog, forward leaping, bounding, moving through things, but with elongated snouts and fangs. But they move because they're made of mist. You can see the particle space between them. They can move through objects.
Right, like apparition. So you see your giant wolf frog beasts leaping out into the mist, and they head towards the light and deeper into camp towards Tomer Graspin. So you send out these mist frog hounds to hunt your prey. I believe it is my turn. As the men that are left in this party were defending this edge of the camp, as seemingly Tomer knew you were coming, they draw short swords and descend upon the barbarian. Multiple attacks from axes, spears, and swords. They trying to hit you. So you fly up into combat and distract one of the guys, and he swings wildly. One of the others finds his mark true and strikes the barbarian. You are now deeper into the camp, and the fog is repealing from the middle of the camp. You can see the other engagements happening. At the edge of the camp across from you, there are still archers firing as the quicker group of young people are darting in between tree stumps, trying not to get shot to pieces. And then as you look to your left, towards the other end of the camp, you see charging also in from the mist the older folks with their melee weapons. They are getting cut down as they can't close the distance fast enough to archers, and others meet them with their blades. This, as a battle, is already going to be a loss for certain. So it is up to you to get the job done and kill him. Right now, there is still a squad of a few dudes around you. You chop off his arm. The man stands there for a second like he's going to keep fighting, and then from blood loss collapses.
I'm still on the outskirts, right? I'm just going to start heading towards the encampment and start just raining arrows on people that I see because I have like a ranged weapon. There's guys next to Krog trying to kill him. So I'm going to, I'm going to do a little blot out the sun and use 2 ammo and hit the 2 guys trying to get him.
So you come out trying to fire at them, and you are met with a burning torch being used as a club to slam you in the stomach as you step out of the fog. You take 8 damage. As you're hit, there's like a burst of fire and cinder from the torch, and you turn, and one of the guys that was lighting arrows is there and pulls back his burning torch to clubber you again. Everyone is in melee combat situation now. You are met with spears and axes or burning torches.
I'm just fighting people off.
You're just deflecting, counterattacking, reposing, blocking.
Grabbing the little ones and throwing them.
The clashing of blades is occurring. You can hear the fighting ringing out around you and also echoing through other parts of the camp. You do see from your position deeper into the camp, there is some like central tents. One looks like it's full of people, like a mess hall or a barrack of some kind. One of the tents looks like a supply tent. And then in between those 2 tents, there is a smaller tent.
While we're looking at that, can I raise my chin to the sky and howl? I guess.
Yeah. You
Oh.
howl out and your frog beast's sanguine voices comes humming to you from the heart of the camp, echoing out from that smallest tent.
Her eyes blazing gold and her focus becomes a laser focus.
I yell, Tomar, show yourself.
It's your guys' turn to take action.
Where is
all,
he? We still surrounded?
Yeah.
Hack and slash.
One guy comes up and he thrusts his sword into you and it gets stuck on you and deals you 5 damage. And while it's stuck on you, you bring down your axe and you split his head like a melon and it popped with a rain of blood on his allies.
And I lap up the blood.
What is Vela doing as Krog next to you is splitting heads, literally?
As Krog continues to cause gore around me, it just feeds Vela. He is giving the tinder for the flame. She is continuously weaving her hands around and above her head, and blood coagulates near her back, creating large, both angelic and demonic wings attached to Vela's back as she uses Blood Angel and has gained flight. And she will take off from the ground, hovering and purveying over the honestly glorious scene of death below her.
Krog seeing this filled with, he's like, it's like a second wind almost. He thinks this is from his own blood god. He has no idea what's going around him. He just sees this angel of like blood and death above him. So he assumes the blood god is answering his prayers for revenge.
That sounds awesome. I love how your characters have dovetailed together.
Yeah, it's interesting, right?
You lift up, sucking the blood pouring from the head of the man that Krog has just split, and you form these wings, and they spread out, and droplets of blood is now raining back down upon Grog as the men around him are being slain.
Is there like a cluster where there's a good amount of people?
That most people are around Grog.
Have you ever seen this much human blood?
From your position, Vela, above the battlefield, you can see that the other 2 groups have been routed at this point, but it has pulled a large chunk of the forces, because those were larger groups, further out from the camp. And though you're certain many of your allies, if not all, have fallen, you are also provided with an opportunity that the camp is, for at least a moment, relatively empty. So one guy steps up and you kick him back as you swing your axe around, and it lops off another guy's head, and it adds to the pile of decapitated corpses at your
Revenge.
There is one guy left in this group fighting you guys. What do you, Vela? What are you thinking?
So Ascended and taking this all on, she is again laser focused on that small tent where her blood ghouls are. So she's going to over that tent and she's going to concentrate on her blood-soaked tiger knuckles, and they burst into flames. I'm going to use cleansing flame. They gain the flaming tag and the blood tag, as well as reach and forceful. I'm going to slash into the roof of the tent. I'm assuming it's some sort of fabric. Just going to eviscerate it and shred the roof of this tent.
So you float over and slash open this tent. And as you peer down into this tent, you see a man standing tall. In his forehead is a glowing red gem, and you can feel his aura. You also see in this tent, there is a few other people that have been mesmerized, but unlike the ones you've seen like dressed as warriors, these ones are younger folk mostly that are being used as slaves, like are tending to him or like making his food and bringing him his things.
I desperately look around and try to identify if any of them are my brother.
There is a few boys in here that are the right age. They all look gaunt and covered in soot. It's hard to tell. You guys see the rain of blood move over and start to slash open this tent. There is still one guy in front of Krog, and it is Jim Bob's turn.
I am going to shoot at the guy that's going after Krog.
Your bolt shoots out and runs him through his guts, and he staggers forward like he's going to strike at your ally again, and then collapses to the floor.
I just walk over to Krog, and I'm just like, hey, like all nonchalant, like it didn't even matter that we killed that guy's dead. And I just point at what I assume is also the blood god. You're telling me she's been the blood god this whole time? You could have told me that.
The blood god chooses his avatar by his will alone. And I just start running towards the tent.
So you're booking it towards the tent. The man turns and he looks up at you, Vela, and then he looks at the tent at the other two charging for him. And he
Before he does that, can I do a roll with my move? I'm going to do what are you waiting for? When you cry out a challenge to your enemies, roll a constitution on a 10 plus. They treat you as the most obvious threat to be dealt with and ignore your companions. You take +2 damage ongoing against them. On a 7 to 9, only a few of the weakest, most foolhardily among them fall prey to my taunting.
What are you
move.
waiting
You're gonna let me do more damage? Yeah.
Tomar, come grasp me.
So you're his favorite target.
Vela does look backward and down and just screams, "Fool!" before Tamar takes his attack.
The gem on his head activates, and the force of his personality is directed as an aura that spills out into the space like a wave of red energy, and it hits all of you. Jim Bob, as this wave hits you, you start to feel like disassociated, like that, like separated from your body, almost like a prison in your mind. As you pull up your bow and you find yourself aiming at the back of your ally, and you let loose a bolt at Krog's back. You try to resist as best you can. You fire the bolt, and a bolt whizzes right past your head, Krog, and hits the side of the tent.
Seeing everything that's going on and the chaos that you're introducing to her very focused and controlled approach, one of the contingencies for my flight is that I may no longer cast a spell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower myself down a bit, and the wings collapse back into Vela and then redirect themselves directly at Tamar. I'm going to roll for cast a spell. Dominate. I push my mind into someone else's. Spend 1 control to make the target take one of these actions. One of my options is give you something they hold. And I'm going to have my blood surround him and pull him close to me. And I'm going to put my thumbs on his temples and hold his head in my hands and say, "Give me my brother."
You grab him with this, like fighting his body with your blood magic that wraps around him, like almost coating him in like an Iron Maiden of blood, pulling on him. And then he just smirks at you, casually opens his hand, fighting against your magic, and gestures to one of the slaves in the room that is like doing a menial task. He's like shining a shoe. And he says, "Is that one yours? You look like him. You're both going to be dead soon." You turn to look and you see your brother with, it takes a moment. You stare into his face and then you realize that's your face, your twins. And he has the most vacant look. You almost don't recognize him, how gaunt he is and dirty. And as you turn to look, roll Defy Danger.
She turns and that golden glimmer from her iris kind of fades for a second, and she sees him and she says, "Victrin?" And a tear rolls down her face.
You turn and your magic loosens on him, and he makes a fist, and that same red aura that he was saturating makes itself into like a blade of energy in his fist and punches you into you.
Krog is going to attack now that he's focused on her.
I would have smashed this fucking orb on his head.
You come in hard and you swing, and as you hit him, his aura like fights to protect him. And you see like the glow of his gemstone in his head dims, like he had to spend his force energy to protect himself against that attack. But you don't actually make contact with his body. Jim Bob, you fire, and Krog just smacks your bolt out of the air. The one-man scourge is going to attack both Krog and Vela. He makes those like blades of energy on his fists again, and he swings at Vela, trying to slice through that protective armor, and he swings a hand at you, and you just knock him back and revert his energy into the table, and he flies over and smashes into the table and is picking himself up off the floor as it's your turn.
I'm going to try to smash his crystal.
So you bring up your axe again and you swing it down towards his head, and you feel the energy push against you, and you see the crystal dim as your blade gets a little bit closer to his head this time than you were last time. And you know you're making progress through his power. Vela.
I know that the only way to save my brother is to kill the snake. I'm going to tap into all of my abilities, and you see that some of her own blood starts to mix with that around her, and I'm going to use the strength of blood and blood pulse. So her eyes, from taking in Victron, to turn back to Tamar, and go all gold all the way across as she rises up a little bit, collecting all the blood, some of her own blood mixing in. And she's going to cast the gnarliest blood bolt you ever did see. So she's levitated, her eyes went gold. The blood all comes around and comes in. It looks like a bear trap of spiked, coagulated blood tendrils. And as they stick in, you can tell that they've kind of left some sort of curse in a way that he's already looking sweaty.
So as it hits him, you hear him cry out in pain. Blah! And he sees he was like keeping his cool before, but now it's like starting to get it literally under his skin as his blood is heating up, and he's using his powers to try to hold on. Jim Bob, in that moment, you pushed back and you feel his mind control break, and you are freed, and you are able to take your own act.
I am going to aim for the crystal in his forehead specifically, right? Like spend some time lining up the shot, get in a vulnerable position.
And pull up your crossbow and fire it, and he feels you break, lashes out with a bolt of energy in your direction, but you dodge that, hit him with the crossbow. It fires, it strikes right in the forehead where the crystal should be, but he has enough force of his aura to stop it, and you see again the crystal faintly loses a little bit of its brightness, and your bolt falls to the floor. Having lost control over you, he is going to re-trigger his aura. So Krog, you feel as though you are disassociating away from your body. You feel not in control of your own muscles as you turn towards Vela and rise up your axe.
Oh God.
Please roll a contest. You roll strength, Krog. Vela, as he turns to you, you see his eyes are vacant and burning red.
It's about as low as I can go.
9 + 3 is 12.
You're able to move out of the way of his lazy swing.
Trying to fight it off. Trying to find them.
But then, Vela, roll me another defy danger as Tomer is falling back away from you as blood is boiling, and he shoots a bolt of red energy.
I'll just shoot at him again. Let's just try it.
I'm going to whistle that ghostly tune a little bit to make sure that my blood cools are around because I haven't been using them. And I'm going to do the same sort of thing. More of the ethereal little orbs in her crystal vial around her neck leave. You can see that her hair gets more and more disheveled, and her clothes actually seem to be soaking up more blood. So rather than looking prim and proper, she's starting to look like a mad woman. She continues to cast her spells. Cast her spells she does as she sends out more blood bolts, and those wispy mists of bloodhounds nip at the target as well.
Your hounds leap out, your frog monster with snouts of a beast, try to bite at Tomer as your sanguine lances fly forward, knocking him back into the side of the tent. And so with the stun, I will take one of his moves away. Jim Bob, as you're standing in the back, you see a blood wave attack hit Tomer right as Krog is coming back at her with his axe and strikes across her blood magic armor. At least one of your friends is looking haggard. I think the other one's pretty beat up.
How does the tyrant look?
The tyrant looks like his gemstone is half as bright as it was when you started.
I think it's time to consider my teammates. I look over my shoulder. I've been attacking. My brother is safe. He's in the room. I got an eye on him. And I turn and look over my shoulder for the first time at my teammates in a long time. I break that focus.
Jim Bob looks like he's had some of his life force drained out of him by that last hit. Krog looks like he's taking a beating, but he's not down.
I'm going to stall as I am right now, as this character is at this moment, and turn and look and realize that to be lawful and do the right thing, Jim Bob does need to survive. So I'm going to put space between me and Tamar and cross towards Jim Bob and try to cast a spell. And I cast Rebirth. Some blood turns to mist, and this mist has that golden shimmer that you can recognize in Vela's eyes. And it lands in and on, and you involuntarily breathe some of it in, and the blood mist breathes new life into you. You are restored to full health. Any poisons or disease are cured. Your debilities are all healed, and lost limbs are regrown. Yeah, this mist totally regenerates Jim Bob. That otherworldly shit hits different than the real world.
Yeah, Jim Bob, you take a deep breath of this shimmering gold mist and you feel revitalized. You've just woke up from the best nap ever, and your sides where you are wounded don't hurt anymore. Your head is clear.
That was better than that crank my cousin Bob Jim makes. I love it. Let's go. I'm ready. And I reload my crossbow.
Krog, your rage, you're trapped in there and your rage just builds and builds and you feel it and your fire starts to burn hotter than his and you push him out of your mind until you feel yourself become back in control of your body. You swing down upon him, and as you're swinging, he's forcing his hands together and like powering out a beam of energy into your chest. He's lost control over you, so
Hack and slash.
yes,
So
it's
I would like to aim for the crystal on his forehead.
So you bring in your axe and you push through his field and you feel your blade of your axe just ding off the crystal in his head. And in that moment, it lets out a burst of energy.
Krog collapses on the ground.
And as you fall, Krog, as the wave of energy hits you and knocks you back from your attack, the crystal also pushes him back and spins in the air for a moment. And Krog collapses to the floor unconscious, and the crystal stone from his head ding, dink onto Krog's chest.
I'm going to shoot at him.
You fire this arrow. He's like summoning up an attack. And like you can see that the stone isn't in his head, but it's still like responding to his commands. He's like pulling out energy from it as it sits on Krog's chest. And he's like pulling up a bolt to fire at you, and you fire the arrow and it strikes him in the head, and the bolt goes wide and flies into the corner of the tent and strikes the enslaved young man in the corner.
Which
Victrin, my brother?
Yeah, you look over and see your brother has collapsed from the attack in the corner of the as he was hit by this rogue beam of red energy. It's also your turn.
I scream and leave and sprint right to Victrin. Victrin! And I'm going to roll to cast a spell. I'm like checking his body for wounds, and I'm going to do the same thing. That golden mist comes down, and I shove it down his throat, and I cast Rebirth on him.
You are pouring your magic into him, and
Yeah.
you hear like a weak cough. And you see as he comes back, his eyes are not clouded and red. His eyes are trying to focus and look up and see your face. He's trying to reach up to you, but he sees in a lot of pain, but he's alive.
And tears just start streaming.
In that moment, Tomera is still alive. He stands up and he pulls this bolt from his head and he reaches out and the crystal floats at his will. And then he lets out two bolts of energy from it, one firing at each of you. And he is floating the gemstone like it's slowly floating back to his forehead.
I have the opportunity. I'm going to cast Rebirth on Krog as well.
So I have the upper hand. I take a +1 ongoing to last breath rolls. When I take my last breath on a 7 to 9, I may make an offer to death in return for my life. If death accepts, he will return you to life. If not, you die. I got a 3.
So
I see the black gate.
You see the black gate and it opens. And standing on the other side is your wife, and she reaches out to you, and you step across the gate. And
Oh yeah, I just immediately step. I just immediately
and
go.
the gate closes behind you,
Yeah.
and you are forever shuffled off the mortal coil. So you pour your energy into his form, and you see the body like heals for a moment from it, but there's no life. As much as you can restore the physical body, you cannot return the soul that death has already taken to its vessel.
I die this time.
I also feel like Vela understands why and knows kind of what happened intuitively and stands up with her red blood mantle intact in defense of Victrin.
I'm going to take another shot at this guy.
You're exchanging fire with him as he's firing back these crimson bolts, and you're firing your bolts of your crossbow. Roll your damage. You will take 4 damage from his attack as more of these bolts hit your body.
6. You said I take 4 damage?
He's looking pretty fucked up. Aura that is protecting him is flickering in and out, and his body is starting to show the damage from the battle. Bruised, cut, bleeding. You guys are ready for for this volley, and he is getting sloppy as he blasts his energy out into the room. It is your turns to try and end him.
I kneel down to Krogs's corpse and I use my fingers to close his eyes and I caress his hair and I say, sleep well. And I use my tiger's claws and I slit his throat and I manifest all the blood out of his body, all of it.
He would approve. He would definitely approve of.
This is what he
of
would
that.
want. And then I'm going to use the spell Entwine and let's see what happens. So I'm going to do like a ginormous ball of blood with these like rotating orbs, piercing magical blood, forceful damage.
So you let out this wave of blood energy, spheres and shards and spears of blood slam into Tomer. And as they do, the light from the stone fades and it turns just a dark, inert red. And his body is slammed into and thrown back, blast out the back of the tent. And he flies and strikes a pile of crates of goods in the courtyard outside between the tents and lays motionless, red head to toe, as though he had been submerged in a sea of blood. And you stand there above your corpse of your ally and you feel a change in the air. This hold this person has had on this home realm is suddenly lifted. The people that were fighting in the forest, traipsing down your allies and slitting their throats, are suddenly released from his hold and fall to the ground in their malnourished forms, crying out to one another. Jim Bob, you stand there looking at the craziest shit you never thought you'd ever see.
I check on my brother really quick. Is he alive and well?
He is not well, but he is alive.
Then I go to Jim Bob and I offer my hand, like walk with me, like hold my hand while we cross the street. You take my hand?
Yeah.
I walk you slowly towards the corpse of Tomar. As we approach Tomar, is there any life left in him?
Maybe like a final wheeze as his body is shutting down.
She kneels like on the other side of his head, like facing you with it, cradling his head in her lap. She asks Jim Bob, would you like to go home?
Jim Bob wants to grab the stone and he sees the power.
So as you're cradling this head and you're saying, do you want to go home?
I'm just looking
You
at the
reach
stone right
out-
there on Krog's body. Yeah, and I just reach out and grab it. Do I have to do
You
like
grab the stone. In that moment, you look up at Jim Bob and he's staring into it, mesmerized. So a little smirk crosses his face. So in conclusion, Tanzel is ushered into an era of rebuilding and peace. The population has been reduced of all the species, and it is a new era without the raging tyrant around. And people slowly start to heal from the terrors of this person. And this tale of the raging tyrant, of the one-man scourge, of Tomer Gaspin, is woven into the tapestry of this ancient stone that keeps appearing through time, which we will hear from again soon.